Summoned by the alien queen, a human learns the truth that stuns him. Ethan had never imagined that a simple diplomatic mission would lead him into the heart of an ancient mystery. He was a seasoned negotiator, skilled in the art of conversation and diplomacy. But today, as the sleek alien vessel took him deeper into the cosmos, he felt a sense of unease settle in his stomach. His mission was clear. The alien queen had summoned him, and the human government had insisted that he answer. Despite the fear that stirred within him, Ethan couldn't ignore the overwhelming curiosity that tugged at his mind. What could the queen want with him? What was so urgent that it required a human to travel to a distant world, one where few had ever returned? As his ship glided silently through the void, Ethan sat in the command seat, eyes focused on the console in front of him. The green glow of the alien ship's interface bathed him in a strange, calming light, but it couldn't quell the storm of thoughts in his mind. He knew that humans had always been wary of the alien races they encountered, and the Queen species was among the most powerful and secretive. Their empire stretched across several star systems, and their ruthlessness in maintaining power was infamous. The thought of facing such a ruler made his palms sweat, but Ethan steeled himself. He had faced danger before. This time, however, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far more significant was waiting for him on the other side of this mission. The ship emerged from the dark expanse of space and into the orbit of a massive planet. Ethan watched as its vibrant blue and green surface came into view, a sharp contrast to the sterile blackness of space. The planet was surrounded by a network of artificial satellites, each one a reminder of the alien queen's vast influence. As the ship began its descent into the atmosphere, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the precision with which it operated. The alien technology was leagues beyond anything humanity had developed, and yet he was about to step foot on the very world that was home to one of the galaxy's most powerful beings. The ship landed with a soft thud, and the door hissed open. Ethan stood up, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He adjusted his uniform, a blend of human and alien designs meant to symbolize cooperation between the two species. He stepped down the ramp, his boots making soft clinks against the metallic surface of the landing pad. He was greeted by a group of alien soldiers, their sleek bodies adorned in dark, reflective armor. They didn't speak, simply motioned for him to follow them. The silence between them was heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that Ethan couldn't fully grasp. As they moved through the city, Ethan was struck by its beauty and its danger. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering spires that seemed to defy gravity, intricate designs that blended technology and nature in a way that felt both alien and familiar. But there was a darkness beneath the beauty. The streets were eerily quiet, and the air was thick with an oppressive stillness. It was clear that the Queen's rule, while powerful, was also one of fear. People hurried through the streets, eyes downcast as if they were too afraid to look up, too afraid to be seen. The soldiers led him to a grand palace, its marble walls shimmering in the pale light of the twin suns overhead. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, an overwhelming display of wealth and power, its vastness a testament to the Queen's rule. As they entered the palace, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with unease. Every step seemed to echo through the empty hallways, as though the building itself was alive, watching him. At the end of the corridor, they stopped before a large set of doors, adorned with intricate symbols that Ethan couldn't begin to understand. The soldiers turned to him, giving a silent nod before pushing the doors open. Inside was a room that seemed to glow with an ethereal light. It was enormous, filled with statues, tapestries, and strange relics from across the galaxy. But what caught Ethan's attention was the figure at the far end of the room. The alien queen sat on a massive throne, her presence dominating the space around her. She was unlike any being he had ever seen, a mixture of beauty and power, with features that seemed both familiar and alien at the same time. Her skin shimmered with a soft, opalescent glow, and her eyes, dark as the depths of space, fixed on him with an intensity that made his heart race. She was tall, her form slender and graceful, draped in a flowing gown that seemed to shift colors with every movement. Her hair, a cascade of shimmering silver, framed her face, adding to the otherworldly aura that surrounded her. Ethan took a step forward, his breath catching in his throat. He had seen recordings of her before, her public appearances, her speeches, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of standing before her. She was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a being of unimaginable power, and yet there was something in her gaze that suggested a depth of wisdom that went beyond mere control. Human, her voice echoed through the room, smooth and melodic, yet carrying an unmistakable authority. "You are the one they sent to speak with me," Ethan nodded, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. "Yes, Your Majesty, I'm Ethan, a representative of Earth." The Queen's lips curved into a faint smile, one that seemed both inviting and calculating. "A representative of Earth," she repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them on her tongue. "Tell me, Ethan of Earth, what do you know of the true nature of your existence?" The question caught him off guard. He had expected to discuss trade agreements, military alliances, or perhaps even cultural exchanges, but this was something entirely different. I'm afraid I don't understand." The Queen stood from her throne, her movements fluid and graceful. She walked toward him, her presence overwhelming the space around her. As she came closer, Ethan could feel the weight of her gaze, the power she exuded like an invisible force pressing down on him. "You are human," she said, her voice low and filled with a strange mixture of pity and reverence. "You have no idea of what you truly are, do you?" Ethan frowned, confusion bubbling in his chest. "I'm just a man, a diplomat." The Queen's eyes narrowed, and for the first time Ethan sensed a flicker of something, concern perhaps. "No, Ethan, you are much more than that. You are the key to an ancient secret, one that has been hidden from your kind for millennia. And you have come here unknowingly to learn it." Her words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He had no idea what she meant, but there was something in her tone that made it clear she was not playing games. She was serious, deadly serious. "I don't understand," he repeated, his voice shaking slightly. The Queen stepped closer, her presence now all-encompassing. "You are not just another species, Ethan. You are not merely the product of Earth's evolution. You are part of something far greater, a legacy that stretches across the stars. And the truth of your origins is a truth that will change everything you know about yourself and your people." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had come here expecting a routine mission, but now, standing before the Queen, he realized that he was about to uncover something that would shatter his understanding of everything. The Queen's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle for such a powerful being. "But first, you must survive what is to come, and if you do, you will understand the truth about humanity's place in this galaxy." Ethan swallowed hard. He had no idea what he was stepping into, but one thing was clear: nothing about this mission was going to be as simple as he had thought. And in that moment, standing before the alien Queen, he realized that the fate of humanity might rest in his hands. Ethan stood in stunned silence, his mind struggling to comprehend the weight of the Queen's words. He was just a man, a simple diplomat from Earth. The idea that he might be part of some ancient legacy, tied to the stars in ways he couldn't understand, seemed impossible. Yet the Queen's gaze never wavered, her dark eyes locked on his with a knowing intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. She was waiting for him to speak, to ask the question that he could barely form in his mind. "Why me?" Ethan finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse with confusion. The queen's lips curved slightly, but there was no humor in the gesture. It was as though she had expected this question, as if she had been waiting for it. She turned away from him, pacing slowly across the room, her movements fluid and graceful, like a predator circling its prey. The room seemed to grow darker as she spoke, her voice low and filled with mystery. "You are the descendant of those who were lost," she said softly. "Long ago, your ancestors were scattered across the galaxy by forces far older than even my kind. They were brought to Earth as part of an experiment, a plan designed to change the course of galactic history." Ethan's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information she was offering. An experiment, forces older than her kind. He couldn't make sense of it. His ancestors weren't from another planet, they were from Earth like him. "I don't understand," Ethan said, his voice shaking slightly. "What do you mean scattered? I'm from Earth. My ancestors are from Earth." The queen stopped pacing and turned to face him. Her expression softened as if she was speaking to a child. "Your Earth is not your true home, Ethan. Your people were placed there, isolated as a means of controlling the future. You were meant to be a secret, forgotten by time, hidden from the rest of the galaxy." Ethan shook his head. This couldn't be real. He had studied history, humanity's rise from primitive beginnings to spacefaring civilization. There was nothing about what she was saying that fit with what he knew. I don't believe you," he muttered, his voice growing stronger with defiance. "This is madness. Earth has always been our home." The queen's eyes glinted with something that could have been amusement, but it was fleeting. "I do not expect you to understand immediately, Ethan. The truth is not something easily accepted, especially by those who have lived their entire lives in the dark." She walked closer, her presence overwhelming. "But you must understand, the galaxy has been watching you. Your rise as a species, your rapid advancement, it has not gone unnoticed. Humanity has been manipulated for centuries, and now the time has come for you to learn the truth about who you really are." Ethan took a step back, his mind whirling. "What do you mean by that? How has humanity been manipulated? By who?" "The forces I spoke of earlier, the ones who scattered your ancestors across the galaxy, they are not a single entity. They are many, and they have operated in the shadows for eons, shaping the course of galactic history to serve their own needs. You, Ethan, and all of humanity have been part of their plan." Ethan could barely keep up. The queen was speaking in riddles, and every answer seemed to lead to more questions. He had come here expecting to negotiate, to discuss human-alien relations, but this was something far beyond anything he could have imagined. "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan asked, his voice firm despite the confusion swirling in his chest. "Why reveal this to me now?" The queen's eyes softened for a brief moment. "Because you are the key, Ethan. You are the first human who has come close enough to uncover the truth. You were chosen, though not by me, to break the cycle, to undo what has been done to your people. And that, my dear Ethan, is why I brought you here." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Chosen? I don't even know what you're talking about." The queen stepped closer, her voice now barely above a whisper. "I was chosen, too. My kind, the alien species that you see before you, we are not what we seem. We were once like you. We were once part of a larger civilization, a race that spanned the stars. But we were manipulated, twisted by the same forces that manipulated your ancestors." Ethan felt a chill creep up his spine. "What happened to them? What happened to your people?" "They are no more," the queen said quietly. "Our civilization fell, consumed by the very powers we sought to understand. The same powers that now control your species. But I remain, and I am here to ensure that humanity does not follow the same path." Ethan was silent for a long moment, trying to process everything she had just said. The idea of humanity being part of some grand galactic scheme was almost too much to bear. He had always believed that Earth was its own cradle, that human history was defined by its struggles and triumphs, not by some hidden, far-off forces. But here he was, standing before the queen of an alien empire, learning that everything he had known might be a lie. "So, what does this mean for humanity?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now, filled with uncertainty. The queen's expression grew solemn. "It means your people are at a crossroads. The galaxy has been manipulating you, using you as pawns in a game that has spanned millennia. Your evolution, your rise, it has all been guided, controlled. But now your people are no longer just players in that game. You have the power to take control of your destiny. You can break free." Ethan's mind was spinning. He had come to this alien world thinking he would negotiate for trade or military alliances. Instead, he was being told that humanity had been enslaved by forces he couldn't even comprehend. The idea of breaking free was both terrifying and exhilarating. But was it even possible? How could humanity fight against forces that had been manipulating them for thousands of years? "And how do we do that?" Ethan asked, his voice growing steadier now, despite the chaos in his mind. "How can we fight these forces? How can we break free?" The queen regarded him for a long moment, her eyes filled with something that looked like pity, but also a kind of respect. "That, Ethan, is the question. You and others like you must lead humanity. You must open their eyes to the truth. But first, you must understand that there are those within your own species who will resist. There are humans who have been seduced by the power these forces offer. You will face betrayal, and you will face enemies who have been waiting for this moment." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "What do you mean? There are traitors among us." "Yes," the queen replied, her voice cold and matter-of-fact, "and you will need to learn who they are if you are to succeed." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The weight of the situation was overwhelming. He had always thought he understood the complexities of intergalactic diplomacy. He had never expected to be thrust into the center of a war that spanned centuries, a war between humanity and the forces that had shaped their destiny. "But why me?" Ethan asked again, his voice filled with frustration. "Why am I the one you chose? Why not someone else?" The queen paused, considering her answer carefully. "You were chosen because you are not blind to the truth. You have always questioned, always searched for meaning beyond what is told to you. That is why you are here. That is why you will lead. But be warned, Ethan, this will not be easy. The path ahead is fraught with danger, and the choices you make will determine the future of your people." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling in his chest. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't ready to lead humanity against a hidden enemy, against the very forces that had shaped their history. But as he looked into the queen's eyes, he realized that there was no turning back. This was the truth. This was the beginning of something far larger than anything he could have ever imagined. He had a choice to make, and for the first time in his life, Ethan wondered if he was truly ready to face the unknown. Ethan stood in the quiet chamber, his thoughts swirling like a storm. The queen's words had shaken him, and now, in the aftermath, everything felt unreal. She had told him that humanity's rise was no accident, that they had been part of a larger plan, one that spanned galaxies and stretched across time. The idea that humanity was not native to Earth, that they had been placed there by some ancient, unseen force, left him feeling disconnected from everything he knew. He had always believed in the story of human history, the rise from the Stone Age, the wars, the revolutions, the journeys into space. But now, all of that seemed hollow, as though it was just a play, a carefully scripted act that humans had unknowingly followed. But who was behind this play, and why? The queen's calm voice cut through his thoughts. "You must prepare yourself, Ethan. The truth is just the beginning. What you choose to do with that truth will determine the fate of your people." Ethan glanced at her, still unsure of what to believe. She had said he was the key, that humanity's future rested on his shoulders. But what could one man do against forces that had manipulated entire civilizations? He had always been a diplomat, not a leader in the traditional sense. He had negotiated deals, mediated disputes and brokered peace, but this was beyond anything he had ever prepared for. "What do you need me to do?" Ethan finally asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. The Queen gave him a look of quiet approval. "I will guide you, but the path you choose is yours. We must gather the scattered forces of humanity, those who are still free, and awaken those who are still under the control of the powers that manipulate them. You will be the leader of this resistance. You will need to convince them that they have been blind to the truth, that their history has been stolen from them." Ethan felt a chill at her words. How could he convince an entire species that everything they knew was a lie? He wasn't even sure if he fully believed it himself. The Queen could speak with certainty, but could he do the same? Could he lead a rebellion when he had just learned the stakes? "There are other humans," the Queen continued, "who have been corrupted, who have made deals with the very forces that seek to control your kind. They will try to stop you. They will try to undermine everything you do. You must be prepared to fight them as well as the ancient powers." Ethan felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He had spent his life studying politics, diplomacy, and the art of negotiation. But this was a war not only for survival but for freedom. He would have to convince humanity that they were more than the sum of their parts, that they had the power to change their destiny. And in doing so, he would have to fight against his own people, those who had already chosen to serve the hidden forces. The Queen gestured for Ethan to follow her, and they left the chamber, stepping into a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were lined with strange symbols, glowing faintly in the low light. Ethan couldn't make sense of them, but the Queen seemed to know them by heart. She moved with purpose, and Ethan followed, unsure of where she was leading him. They came to a large room filled with holographic maps, alien technology unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the machinery. The Queen motioned toward the display. "This is the heart of the rebellion. Here we track the movements of the forces that control your people, and here we will begin to organize your resistance." Ethan took in the sight of the maps, his mind racing. The galaxy stretched out before him, a vast expanse of stars and systems, each one representing a potential battleground. The Queen had said that humanity's rise was no accident, that their place in the galaxy had been carefully orchestrated. Now he saw how those forces had shaped human history, manipulating events from the shadows, pulling the strings of human development like a puppet master. "But how?" Ethan asked, looking at the map with growing confusion. "How do we even begin to fight back? The forces that control humanity are everywhere. They're deeply embedded in your society and mine. How can we expose them without being crushed?" The Queen's gaze softened for a moment. "You will have help, Ethan, but you must first understand the nature of the enemy. They are not just an army or a political group. They are an ideology, a way of thinking that has been passed down for generations. They believe in the control of all life, in the subjugation of the many for the benefit of the few." Ethan felt a cold knot form in his stomach. An ideology. It wasn't just about power. It was about control, about shaping the future of every species in the galaxy according to a single, unyielding vision. The very idea was terrifying. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized how deeply entrenched this ideology must be. It wasn't just alien overlords in the shadows. It was the systems, the beliefs, the very structures that governed their lives. "You need to start with your own people," the Queen said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "You need to make them see the truth, but it will not be easy. Many humans will not want to believe what you tell them. They have been taught to trust the system, to trust their leaders, even if those leaders are blind to the truth themselves." Ethan nodded, trying to steady himself. The challenge ahead seemed impossible, but he had no choice. He had to try. He had to lead humanity into the light, even if that meant confronting everything he had ever known. "How do I start?" he asked, his voice firm now, a sense of resolve settling over him. The queen smiled, a rare and fleeting expression. You start by contacting those who are still free. There are factions within your own government, within the military, who have long suspected that something is wrong. They are waiting for a leader, and you will be that leader. Ethan felt a flicker of hope rise within him. There were those who knew the truth. That was something he hadn't expected. He had thought that humanity was completely under the control of the forces the Queen had spoken of. But if there were factions within their own government, it meant there was a small chance, that the truth could be uncovered and humanity could be freed. "Where do I find them?" he asked, eager to take the first step. The Queen's gaze turned hard, her voice cold and serious. "They will find you, but be warned, there are others who will be watching. There are those who have chosen to align themselves with the forces that control humanity. They will come after you, and they will stop at nothing to keep you from succeeding." Ethan nodded again, understanding the gravity of the situation. He was not just fighting a faceless enemy. He was fighting against humans, who had made a choice to side with the enemy. And that would make this war even harder. But the Queen was right. If humanity had any hope of breaking free, it had to start with those who still held the truth, those who had not yet been corrupted. They spent the next few hours going over the plans. Ethan absorbed the information quickly, but the weight of the responsibility was beginning to sink in. He had never expected to be in this position. He had never imagined that he would be leading a revolution, fighting against forces that had been manipulating humanity for millennia. And yet, here he was, standing in an alien palace, preparing to lead humanity into the unknown. As the meeting came to a close, the Queen turned to him, her eyes filled with an intensity that he couldn't quite read. "Do not underestimate the forces you will face, Ethan. They will try to break you, to turn your people against you, but you must remain steadfast. The future of humanity depends on you." Ethan stood tall, meeting her gaze. He had no choice now. He had to follow this path, no matter how difficult it would be. The future of his people of Earth was in his hands. He couldn't afford to fail. "I won't let you down," he said quietly, the words carrying more weight than he had ever intended. The Queen gave a small nod. "I know you won't." And with that, the next phase of humanity's future began. Ethan stood on the balcony of the Queen's palace, staring out over the alien city that sprawled beneath him. The stars hung in the sky like scattered jewels, far away yet somehow within reach. He had always imagined space to be a place of mystery and wonder, but now, standing here, he saw it as a battleground. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's place in it was more uncertain than ever. The weight of his new reality was heavy on his shoulders. He had come here to represent Earth, to negotiate and form alliances. But now, he was a leader in a war he had never asked for, a war that would determine the future of his people. And yet, as the Queen had told him, humanity had been manipulated for centuries. Their history was not their own, and now he had to take control of their destiny. He had spent the past few days in preparation, meeting with the Queen's advisors and learning what he could about the enemy. He learned that the ancient powers that controlled humanity had been working from the shadows, using both direct manipulation and subtle influence to guide human history. They had shaped every major event, from the rise of empires to the discovery of space travel, all to keep humanity in check. And the Queen's people, her empire, were the ones who had tried to break free from that control. They had once been part of the same larger civilization that had scattered humans across the galaxy. But they had been betrayed, left to fend for themselves, and now they were the only ones fighting back against the forces that still held humanity captive. Ethan knew that if he was going to lead this rebellion, he would need more than just knowledge. He needed a plan. And that plan would have to involve the humans who had no idea what was really happening, the ones who still believed in the systems they had been raised to trust. He turned away from the balcony and walked back into the palace. The queen's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him of the task ahead. He had to awaken humanity to the truth, to show them what they had been blind to for so long. It wouldn't be easy. Many would resist, even fight against him, and some would be lost along the way, but there was no turning back. The future of humanity depended on him, and he could not afford to fail. Later that day, Ethan met with the Queen again. She was standing in front of a massive holographic map, showing the positions of various human colonies across the galaxy. There were so many of them, some thriving, some struggling, and some under the control of the forces that had kept humanity in the dark. "The first step," the Queen said, her voice steady, "is to gather the free humans. There are pockets of resistance scattered across your colonies. They have been waiting for a leader. You are that leader." Ethan nodded. He had heard of these resistance groups, small cells of humans who had grown suspicious of the powers that controlled their world. They were out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to rise up. But now they had a leader, a representative of humanity who knew the truth. "How do we find them?" Ethan asked, leaning closer to the map. "They will come to you," the Queen said. "The ones who are still free will recognize you. They will know you are the one who will lead them to freedom. The others," she paused, her expression hardening, "the others will try to stop you. They will do whatever they can to maintain their control." Ethan's mind raced. He had spent his entire life negotiating, speaking for Earth, making deals and solving problems. But this was different. This wasn't about compromise or diplomacy. This was about something far more important: freedom. And he knew that not all humans would be ready to accept the truth. Some would fight to keep the world as it was. They would resist the change no matter the cost. "I understand," Ethan said, his voice firm. "But I can't do this alone. I need support. I need people who can help me lead this movement." "You will have help," the Queen replied, her eyes softening. "But you must earn their trust. They will not follow you simply because I say so. You must show them that you are worthy of their loyalty, that you can lead them to victory." Ethan took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy, but he was determined. He couldn't let fear or doubt stop him. He had seen enough of the manipulation, enough of the lies. The truth had to come out no matter the cost. The Queen handed him a small device, a communicator that would allow him to reach out to the resistance groups. It was simple, but it would serve as a lifeline. "Use this," she said. "It will connect you to those who are waiting for you." Ethan held the device in his hand, feeling the weight of what it represented. This was it, the moment when everything would change. The device was his connection to the outside world, to the people who were still fighting, still trying to break free. And now it was up to him to bring them together, to lead them in the fight for humanity's future. "You must be ready," the Queen said, her voice now low and serious. "There are those who will try to stop you. There will be betrayal. There will be loss, but you must stay strong. The path ahead is dangerous, but it is the only way." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. He was ready. He had to be. As the meeting ended, Ethan stepped out of the room, the weight of the responsibility settling on him. He had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain: he couldn't go back. The only way forward was to lead humanity out of the darkness and into the light. Over the next few days, Ethan made contact with the first of the resistance groups. They were a mix of soldiers, scientists, and ordinary civilians who had come to realize the truth. They had been waiting for someone to lead them, and now they had him. The initial meetings were tense. Many were skeptical, unsure of Ethan's ability to lead. But as he spoke, as he explained the truth about humanity's past and the forces that had been controlling them, something shifted. Doubt gave way to belief, and belief gave way to action. As more groups reached out to him, Ethan began to see the true scope of the movement. There were more free humans out there than he had ever imagined, scattered across the galaxy, living in hiding, waiting for the day they could rise up. And now that day had come. The first major battle was not on some distant battlefield but within Ethan himself. He had to convince people, his own people, that they were not just pawns in a game they didn't understand, that the life they had been living was a lie, shaped by forces they had never known. It was a hard truth, and many would fight to hold onto the world they knew. But the resistance was growing, and with each new ally, Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope. However, not everyone agreed with the plan. As the resistance grew, so did the number of those who fought to keep humanity under the control of the ancient powers. The resistance had made their first moves, but the enemy was not going to stand by and let them succeed. They would fight back with everything they had. They had the power, the resources, and the will to maintain their control. The battle for humanity's future was just beginning. Ethan knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But as he looked at the growing army of resistance fighters, as he saw the hope in their eyes, he knew that they had something that the enemy could never understand: the will to be free. And with that will, they would face whatever came next. In the days to come, Ethan would lead the resistance against the forces that had controlled humanity for so long. He would face betrayals, challenges, and losses, but he would never give up. The future of humanity was at stake, and he would fight to the end to ensure they had a future of their own making. The Queen had been right. He was the leader they had been waiting for. And now, he would prove that humanity was more than just the sum of its parts. They were a force in their own right, capable of shaping their destiny and breaking free from the chains that had bound them for so long. The rebellion was no longer just a dream. It had grown into something real, something powerful. Ethan had watched as the resistance gathered strength, watched as people from every corner of the galaxy came together to fight for their freedom. But the more they grew, the more dangerous it became. The forces that had controlled humanity for so long were not going to give up without a fight. They had underestimated the strength of the human spirit, but they would soon learn that humanity would not be easily subdued. Ethan stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him. The map of the galaxy flickered, showing the locations of the resistance cells, the movements of enemy forces, and the key strategic points that would determine the outcome of the war. The battle lines were drawn. The stakes were higher than ever, and Ethan knew that the next few days would decide the future of humanity. His fingers hovered over the controls as he studied the map. The enemy was closing in on several of the largest resistance strongholds, and time was running out. Ethan had to act quickly. He couldn't afford to wait for reinforcements. He had to make the first move, strike when the enemy least expected it. He turned to his advisors, a mix of soldiers, strategists, and resistance leaders. They were all there, waiting for him to give the order. The weight of their trust in him felt heavier than ever. "We have one shot at this," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm. "We take the initiative. We strike at their weak points, disrupt their supply lines, and force them into a position where they have no choice but to fight on our terms." The room was silent for a moment as the plan sank in. They all knew what was at stake. If they failed, the consequences would be devastating. The enemy would crush them, and humanity would remain under their control for eternity. But if they succeeded, they could shift the balance of power. They could give humanity a chance to break free, to forge their own destiny. "We'll hit their supply routes first," Ethan continued, his mind racing as he thought through the details. "Once we cripple their logistics, we'll strike their command centers. We need to cut off their leadership, make them scramble to respond. Without their coordination, they'll be scattered." One of the senior commanders nodded. "And what about the human collaborators?" he asked, his voice cold. "There are still factions within the human government that are loyal to the enemy." Ethan's eyes hardened. "We deal with them later. Right now, our priority is to hit the enemy hard and fast. The collaborators will follow. We can't afford to let them weaken us from within." Another advisor spoke up. And what about the Queen? She's the one who brought us here. She's given us the resources and the knowledge to fight. But what if she's betrayed us? What if she has her own agenda? Ethan paused. The Queen had been instrumental in the Resistance's rise, but there had always been a part of him that remained cautious. She had a history that was shrouded in mystery, and her motivations weren't entirely clear. But right now, there was no time for doubt. She had given him the tools to lead the fight, and he had to trust that she wanted the same thing he did, freedom for humanity. "We'll deal with the Queen later," Ethan said, his voice hard. "Right now, we fight for our future. We fight for humanity. Nothing else matters." The room was filled with a sense of purpose now, and Ethan could feel the energy shift. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. The Resistance had grown from a few scattered cells into a formidable force, and now they were ready to take the fight to the enemy. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about victory. The attack began just before dawn, when the enemy least expected it. Ethan's forces launched their strike on the enemy's supply lines, cutting off vital resources and leaving their forces stranded. The initial battles were fierce, but the enemy was caught off guard. They had expected the Resistance to cower, to hide in the shadows, but instead, humanity was fighting back with everything they had. Ethan watched the first wave of Resistance fighters push through enemy lines, their weapons blazing as they took out key targets. The enemy was scrambling, trying to regroup, but it was too late. The Resistance had gained momentum, and with every victory the tide of the war turned in their favor. But victory came at a cost. There were casualties. Some of the best fighters, some of the people Ethan had come to rely on, fell in battle. He felt their loss deeply, but he knew they had given their lives for a cause worth fighting for. They had fought not for glory, but for freedom, and their sacrifices would not be in vain. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden message on his communicator. It was from the Queen. "You've made your move, Ethan," her voice crackled through the device. "But the enemy is not as easily defeated as you think. They have more resources than you realize, and they will stop at nothing to maintain control. You must be prepared for what comes next." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had known the enemy would retaliate, but the Queen's words made it clear that they were about to face something far worse than they had imagined. "We're ready," Ethan said, his voice resolute. "We've taken the first step. Now we finish this." The battle raged on for days, the Resistance making progress but facing fierce opposition. The enemy's retaliation was brutal, and Ethan watched as the forces of the Resistance were pushed to their limits. But they didn't give up. They fought on, knowing that they had no choice but to win. Then came the moment they had all been waiting for, the final push. The enemy's command center was within reach, and Ethan knew that if they could take it, they would have won the war. But it wouldn't be easy. The command center was heavily fortified, and the enemy's most elite forces were guarding it. Ethan had to lead the charge, knowing that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders. He gathered his most trusted soldiers and set out for the command center, the sound of battle echoing in the distance. As they moved forward, the air was thick with tension. Every step felt like it could be their last, but Ethan didn't waver. This was what he had been preparing for. This was the moment that would define humanity's future. As they reached the command center, the final battle began. The enemy's forces were waiting for them, and the fighting was intense. Ethan led the charge, his weapon flashing as he cut through the enemy ranks. The Resistance fighters pushed forward, determined to reach their goal. They fought with everything they had, knowing that this was their last chance to win. The battle seemed endless, each moment a blur of chaos and violence. But eventually, the Resistance broke through. They reached the heart of the command center, where the enemy's leadership was stationed. And there, in the midst of the chaos, Ethan faced the enemy's leader. The leader stood tall, their eyes cold and calculating. "You think you've won?" they sneered. "This is just the beginning. You cannot defeat us. We are everywhere. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood tall. We are not afraid of you anymore. The time of your control is over. With that, the final blow was struck. The enemy's leadership was defeated and the command center fell. The victory was hard-earned, but it was theirs. The resistance had won. Humanity had won. Ethan stood in the ruins of the command center, the echoes of battle still ringing in his ears. He looked around at the faces of the resistance fighters, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and triumph. They had done it. They had broken free from the chains that had bound them for so long. But the war was not over. There would be more battles to fight, more enemies to face. But for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of hope. Humanity was no longer under the control of the ancient powers. They were free, and the future was theirs to shape. As the resistance celebrated their hard-won victory, Ethan looked up at the stars. The galaxy was vast and there was much left to do. But one thing was certain: humanity had earned its place in the universe. And together, they would build a future of their own making, free from the shadows that had held them for so long.